She cheated, mocked me as a workhorse in court, but when I took off my shirt, everything changed. Have you ever found yourself in a moment so surreal, you wonder if you're the main character in someone's bad sitcom? That's how I felt, sitting in that courtroom, staring at Sophia's smug face. I'd braced myself for the usual jabs. That you never did enough, or I was the only one trying, but what came out of her mouth was a masterpiece of cruelty. You're like a workhorse, Ryan, easy to ride, but absolutely useless in the long run. The courtroom actually chuckled. I could feel the heat rising in my neck, spreading to my ears, and settling somewhere in my chest, like a lit furnace, my fists clenched under the table, my nails digging into my palms. But I didn't flinch. She wanted a reaction, and I wasn't about to give it to her. See, Sophia always had a knack for cutting deep, for twisting the knife just right. It wasn't enough to leave the marriage, she had to take my dignity. With her, that comment, workhorse, wasn't just an insult, it was a summary of how she saw me for years. Despite everything I'd done, I worked 2 jobs for a while, trying to keep up with her lifestyle. I skipped nights out, didn't upgrade my car, and wore the same tired suit for 3 years, because Sophia needed the latest of everything. And now I was a workhorse. I scanned the room. Her lawyer smirked. The judge's face remained impassive. The gallery, they were entertained. To them, this was a midday drama, something to discuss over lunch, but to me, this was 6 years of my life, boiled down to a punchline. What hurt wasn't just the words, it was that they laughed. I'd spent years thinking I was building something with Sophia, only to realize she'd been watching from the sidelines, waiting to find the next best thing. It wasn't just her betrayal, it was her mockery of the man I'd been. While I was with her, when the judge called for a short recess, I took the opportunity to step out. The walls of the courtroom felt like they were closing in, and I needed to breathe. Outside, I leaned against the cool stone pillar and closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I let myself feel the weight of it all, the humiliation, the anger, the sheer disbelief that someone I loved so deeply could strip me down so mercilessly. And yet, there was a part of me that found it oddly liberating. I know that sounds crazy, but hear me out. Sophia had finally said out loud what she'd probably been thinking for years. The gloves were off, and I didn't have to pretend anymore. No more walking on eggshells. No more second-guessing myself, and no more trying to fix something that had been broken for a long, long time. I straightened up, and looked at my reflection in a nearby window. I didn't see a workhorse, I saw someone who was tired, but still standing, someone who had more strength than Sophia had ever given him credit for. And as I adjusted my tie and prepared to go back in, I made a decision. If Sophia wanted a show, I'd give her one, but it wouldn't be the kind she was expecting. You know what's funny? You can look back at your own life and pinpoint all the moments you should have seen it coming. I stood in that courtroom, letting Sophia's words roll off me like water, but inside my head, I was rifling through years of memories. The signs were all there, I just didn't want to see them. When we first met, Sophia had this energy about her. She walked into a room, and everyone noticed. She was elegant, confident, and had this magnetic laugh that made people want to stay just a little longer. I wasn't immune. I was smitten. When she said yes to my awkward dinner invitation, I thought I'd won the lottery. The first year of marriage, it was great. At least that's what I told myself. We traveled, we laughed, and we dreamed big. I wanted a life with her. She wanted a life that looked good on Instagram, but I didn't see the difference then. I thought I could give everything she wanted, if I just worked hard enough. So I worked. Boy, did I work. Early mornings, late nights, skipped weekends. I poured every ounce of energy into providing for her. She wanted the condo downtown. I found a way to make it happen. She wanted designer handbags. Sure, I tightened my belt when she decided she was too good for her office job and wanted to pursue her passions. I supported her without question. But here's the thing. I don't think Sophia ever saw me as her partner. To her, I was a stepping stone, a way to get to where she wanted to be. She didn't see the sacrifices I made, the things I gave up. All she saw was the result. The condo, the handbags, the nice dinners, and when the novelty wore off, so did her affection. Looking back, I can't pinpoint the exact moment she started to drift away. Maybe it was the first time She came home late without an explanation. Maybe it was the weekend trips she started taking with her friends. Maybe it was the way. She'd roll her eyes when I asked how her day was, but there was one moment I'll never forget. It was our 3rd anniversary. I'd planned this whole evening, dinner at the restaurant where we had our first date, followed by a surprise weekend getaway. I'd saved for months. When I told her about it, her response was, that's it, 3 years of love, effort, and devotion, boiled down to 2 words that gutted me. Of course, I didn't say anything. I laughed it off, told her I'd try harder. Next year, that's what I did back then. I excused her. I excused the growing distance, the dismissive tone, the way she'd started prioritizing her social media over our conversations. I didn't want to admit that the woman I married was changing, or maybe she'd always been this way. And I was just starting to see it, but the real kicker came a year later, when I stumbled across a receipt for a piece of jewelry I didn't recognize. It wasn't for me. She didn't even bother to hide it. When I confronted her, she laughed and said, "It's just a gift. For a friend, right." I should have walked away then. I should have packed my things and left, but I didn't. I told myself I could fix it, that if I just worked a little harder, loved her a little more, I could bring her back. What a fool I was. By the time I realized the truth, it was too late. She was already 1 foot out the door. Her sights set on someone else, Benjamin, the wealthy investor with a sports car and a villa in the hills. She thought he was her ticket to the life she deserved. Standing in that courtroom, I could see it so clearly. I'd been nothing more than a stepping stone for Sophia, a means to an end, and now that she thought she was done with me. She didn't even have the decency to leave quietly, but she underestimated me. She thought I'd crumble under her insults, that I'd let her walk away with everything I'd worked for. What she didn't realize was that the years of being dismissed, disrespected, and undervalued had forged something in me she didn't expect: strength. She wanted to tear me down. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction, not now, not ever. When the judge called us back in, I took a deep breath and stepped into that courtroom, not as the man Sophia thought she could destroy, but as the man who was ready to reclaim his story. The judge asked Sophia's lawyer to present their arguments, and of course, they started with the same tired script. I was lazy, uninspired, and a burden in the marriage. The workhorse comment got thrown in again, followed by a smug glance from Sophia. She leaned back in her chair, like she'd already won. But here's the thing about underestimating someone: it always backfires. When my lawyer, Claire, stood to speak, I felt the calm settle over me. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Claire began by dismantling their narrative, point by point, using facts to paint a very different picture: bank statements, receipts, and records of my long hours and sacrifices. All of it laid bare for the court to see. But the real moment came when Claire turned to me and said, "Ryan, would you like to address the court?" This was my chance. I stood up, adjusted my tie, and walked to the center of the room. My palms were sweating, but my resolve was solid. "Sophia called me a workhorse," I began, my voice steady. "And I suppose she's not entirely wrong. I worked hard, harder than she'll ever know, to build the life we shared. But what she won't tell you is that the sacrifices I made were never for me. They were for us, for her." I paused, scanning the room. The gallery was silent, their earlier chuckles replaced with rapt attention. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. "Since Sophia enjoys metaphors, let me give you one of my own," I continued. "Yes, I'm a workhorse, but not because I'm weak or expendable. It's because I carry weight, real weight, and I never faltered, no matter how heavy it got." Then I did something that caught everyone off guard. I took off my suit jacket, unbuttoned my shirt, and slid it off my shoulders. The collective gasp that filled the room was almost cinematic. My torso was a map of scars and calluses, each one telling a story. The years of manual labor, long shifts, and sacrifices etched into my skin. These were the marks of someone who had given everything and asked for nothing in turn. "This," I said, gesturing to the scars, "is what being a workhorse looks like." While Sophia was busy spending money on things she didn't need, I was out there making sure she had them. And yet, she stands here today and mocks me, as if I've done nothing. I turned to face her, locking eyes with her for the first time. Her smug expression was gone. replaced with something I'd never seen before: shame. "Here's the truth Sophia doesn't want you to know," I said, my voice rising. "The reason we had a condo downtown, my overtime hours, the vacation she bragged about on social media, my savings, the freedom she enjoyed while I worked 2 jobs, my sacrifice, and now she wants to strip me of everything I have left. As if I'm nothing more than an obstacle in her path to a new life." I could feel the room shifting. The gallery wasn't laughing anymore, they were listening. "But here's the thing," I said, my voice firm, "I'm not an obstacle. I'm a survivor, and I won't let anyone, not even the woman I once loved, take away what I've built." I turned to the judge, who was watching me with an unreadable expression. "That's all I have to say," I finished, buttoning up my shirt and walking back to my seat. The rest of the session was a blur. Sophia's lawyer fumbled, trying to regain their footing. But it was clear the damage had been done. Sophia herself sat frozen, her earlier confidence shattered, when the judge called for another recess. Claire turned to me and whispered, "That was brilliant." I didn't feel brilliant, I felt exposed, vulnerable, but I also felt something else. Free. For the first time in years, I'd spoken my truth, and it felt damn good. Sophia thought she could control the narrative. But she forgot one crucial detail. The truth doesn't stay buried forever. You could practically hear a pin drop when the judge called the courtroom back into session. Sophia's lawyers shuffled their papers, clearly rattled. The smug confidence they'd walked in with earlier had melted away. Sophia too sat stiffly in her chair, her fingers drumming anxiously on the table. The courtroom laughter from before was a memory. And me, I sat there, calm, arms folded, watching them scramble to pick up the pieces. For years I'd been on the defensive. In our marriage, always trying to make things right, always feeling like I wasn't enough, but this time, I wasn't playing their game. This time, I was the one in control. Claire, my lawyer, didn't waste a second. She stood up, her voice sharp and confident. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that directly contradicts the narrative the opposing counsel has attempted to construct." She handed a thick stack of documents to the judge: bank statements, expense reports, receipts, all of it meticulously organized and highlighted. I'd spent weeks digging through every account, every bill, and every piece of paperwork to make sure we had it all. "Here, we have a clear record of Mr. Ryan's financial contributions to the marriage," Claire continued. "He paid the mortgage, covered household expenses, and even funded Sophia's personal ventures, expenses she conveniently omitted from her testimony." The judge flipped through the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. Claire wasn't done. "Additionally, Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Sophia diverted funds from their joint account to a private account she kept hidden from Mr. Ryan. These funds were used to finance her personal lifestyle, including extravagant vacations and purchases unrelated to the marriage." That was when the color started draining from Sophia's face. "And finally," Claire said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "we have proof of Mrs. Sophia's infidelity." At that, Sophia's lawyers shot to their feet. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant to the case." The judge raised a hand, silencing them. "Continue, Miss Claire." Claire nodded, and handed over another folder. Photos, hotel receipts, and correspondence between Mrs. Sophia and her lover, Benjamin. The affair wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a financial one. Mrs. Sophia used joint marital funds to support this extramarital relationship. Sophia's lawyer slumped back into their seat. The fight had left them. Sophia, on the other hand, looked like she wanted to vanish into thin air. Her face was pale, her hands clenched in her lap. I could see her biting the inside of her cheek, trying to keep her composure. But the cracks were showing. The judge looked up from the folder, his gaze hard. "Mrs. Sophia, do you have anything to say in response to these allegations?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For once, she had nothing to say. I'll admit, watching her squirm wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be. It didn't erase the years of pain, or the nights I'd spent wondering what I'd done wrong. But it did give me something I hadn't felt in a long time: vindication. Sophia's lawyer tried to recover, offering weak rebuttals and excuses. But it was clear they were fighting a losing battle. The evidence was overwhelming, and the judge wasn't buying their attempts to shift the blame. As the session came to a close, the judge announced that a decision would be made soon. he gave Sophia a pointed look. "Mrs. Sophia, I suggest you reflect on your actions and their consequences before we reconvene." She nodded silently, her eyes fixed on the table. Walking out of the courtroom, Claire turned to me with a rare smile. "You've got them on the ropes," she said. I nodded. But I didn't let myself celebrate just yet. There was still work to be done, still a decision to be made, but for the first time. I felt like I was winning, and that felt pretty damn good. The day Sophia's carefully crafted facade crumbled completely. Wasn't some grand, dramatic showdown, it was quieter, more devastating, and infinitely more satisfying. The courtroom felt unusually charged. When the session resumed, Sophia's lawyer had clearly spent the night scrambling to salvage their case. They shuffled papers, whispered furiously with her, and occasionally shot me unclear glares that could have melted steel. I sat back, arms crossed, watching it all unfold. Sophia, for all her usual poise, was visibly unraveling. Her makeup was flawless as always, but her posture betrayed her. She sat hunched, her eyes darting nervously to the judge, to me, and even to the gallery behind us, the woman who had mocked me with the Workhorse comment just days ago, now looked like someone walking a tightrope over an abyss. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. He wasted no time. "Before we proceed further, I have reviewed the evidence submitted by the plaintiff, including financial records, correspondence, and testimony from third parties. It is clear that Mrs. Sophia has engaged in behavior detrimental to the integrity of this marriage." Sophia's head snapped up, her lawyer's whispered warning clearly ignored. The judge wasn't done. "This includes, but is not limited to, siphoning funds from a joint account, engaging in extramarital affairs, and attempting to misrepresent Mr. Ryan's contributions." During these proceedings, you could have heard a pin drop. Sophia's face was pale, her lips trembling, as though she wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. "Mrs. Sophia," the judge continued, his tone stern, "your actions not only undermine your claims, but also paint a picture of significant misconduct on your part. This court does not look kindly upon such behavior." And there it was, the moment her carefully curated image shattered. The gallery was buzzing with whispers. Even Sophia's lawyer looked like they wanted to sink through the floor. But the best part, I hadn't even needed to lift a finger. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Ryan, given the evidence presented, this court finds your claims of financial and emotional exploitation to be credible. Furthermore, you have demonstrated remarkable composure and integrity throughout these proceedings." I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. But inside, I felt the surge of vindication. Years of being belittled, of questioning my worth, of feeling like I wasn't enough. It all came rushing back, only to be replaced by something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride. The next few minutes were a blur of legal formalities. The judge outlined the financial penalty Sophia would face, including restitution of the funds she'd stolen, and a significant portion of the marital assets being awarded to me. And then came the final blow. "Mrs. Sophia," the judge said, leaning forward slightly, "this court recognizes the harm your actions have caused, not only to Mr. Ryan, but also to the integrity of this union. I would advise you to reflect deeply on the choices that brought you to this point." Sophia looked like she might cry, but she didn't. Instead, she sat there, shoulders slumped, her once unshakable confidence reduced to ashes, as the judge adjourned the session. Sophia's lawyer turned to her, speaking in hushed tones. I caught snippets of the conversation, words like reputation and damage control. She didn't look at me as I gathered my things to leave, but as I walked past her table, I couldn't resist stopping. I leaned in, just enough for her to hear me. "Workhorse, huh," I said, my voice low and calm. "Looks like this Workhorse just lapped you." She didn't respond, didn't even lift her head. For the first time, Sophia had no words. As I walked out of the courtroom, Claire caught up with me, a rare grin on her face. You should have seen her expression when the judge listed the penalties. She said. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. For the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't carrying the weight of her mockery, her manipulation, or her betrayal. I was free, outside. The air was crisp, the sun shining brighter than it had in months. I paused on the steps of the courthouse, taking it all in. Sophia thought she could humiliate me, break me, and walk away with everything I'd worked for. Instead, she was the one walking away empty-handed, her mask torn off for everyone to see, and me. I was just getting started. Walking out of that courthouse felt like shedding a heavy coat in the middle of a heat wave. For the first time in years, I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. The sting of Sophia's betrayal was still there. But it wasn't the sharp pain it had been. Now it felt like a bruise, tender but healing. Claire walked beside me, going over the next steps in the divorce process, but honestly, I wasn't listening. My mind was already ahead, thinking about what my life could look like. Without Sophia in it, for years, my world had revolved around her needs, her wants, her endless demands. Now I had the chance to ask myself, what do I want? That question lingered in my mind as I started rebuilding. The first step was simple, but symbolic. I cleared out every trace of Sophia from my life, her clothes, her shoes, the ridiculous decor she'd insisted on buying. All of it went into boxes. It was strange watching the space transform. As I reclaimed it, the living room felt bigger. Without her oversized furniture, the walls felt brighter. Without her pretentious art pieces, for the first time, the apartment felt like mine. I kept a few things, though, the practical stuff, dishes, towels, furniture that actually served a purpose, but the rest, I donated it. Or tossed it without a second thought. I didn't want any reminders of the life we'd built, or more accurately, the life I'd carried. While she decorated, my second step was even more personal. I dug through my closet, and found my old sketchbook, the one I hadn't touched in years. Back before the overtime hours, before the endless demands of Sophia's lifestyle, I used to draw, nothing fancy, just landscapes and cityscapes I'd see on my way to work. It was my way of relaxing, of letting my mind wander. Sophia had laughed at it once, calling it a childish hobby. I remember the way her voice dripped with condescension, as she asked, why waste time on something that doesn't make money? I'd put the sketchbook away after that, but now I opened it up, and started drawing again. At first, my lines were shaky, my hand unsteady from years of neglect, but as the days passed, the muscle memory came back. Each sketch felt like reclaiming a part of myself Sophia had tried to bury. I also reconnected with old friends, the ones I drifted away from during my marriage. It was humbling to admit how isolated I'd become, but their responses were nothing but supportive. One friend, Jake, invited me out for a drink and said, "We were waiting for you to wake up, man. You deserve better than what she gave you." Those nights out, those conversations, they reminded me of who I used to be. Before I became Sophia's husband, I wasn't just the guy who worked late and paid the bills. I was Ryan, the friend, the artist, the guy who loved bad movies and long hikes. Work became easier too, without Sophia draining me emotionally and financially. I had more energy to focus on my career. My boss noticed the change, and even commented on how productive I'd become. It felt good to be recognized for something other than my ability to endure. And then there was the gym. I hadn't realized how much stress I'd been carrying until I started lifting weights again. Every rep, every mile on the treadmill, felt like I was exercising the ghosts of my marriage. My body changed quickly. Years of manual labor had given me a solid foundation, and it didn't take long for the results to show. I didn't do it despite Sophia, though I'd be lying if I said the thought of her seeing me now didn't bring a little satisfaction. I did it for me, to feel strong again, to remind myself that I wasn't just a workhorse. One night, as I stood in front of the mirror, shirtless, looking at the scars and calluses Sophia had once mocked, I saw stories. I saw the years of hard work that had kept us afloat, the sacrifices I'd made, and the strength it had taken to walk away. Those marks weren't signs of failure, they were badges of resilience. The calls and texts from Sophia started about 2 weeks after the final hearing. At first, they were cold and transactional, questions about when she could pick up the last of her things. Then they became something else. "Ryan, I've been thinking a lot about us." One text read, "Can we talk?" I didn't respond. What was there to talk about? She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. There was no going back. Another message came a few days later. "I miss you. Maybe we rushed things." This one made me laugh, not out of cruelty, but because of how predictable it was. Sophia had spent years taking me for granted, assuming I'd always be there, and now that she realized she'd been wrong, she wanted a do-over. But I wasn't the same Ryan she'd walked all over. I didn't need her validation anymore. I didn't need her at all. Instead of replying, I blocked her number. That act, as simple as it was, felt like closing the door on a chapter of my life I never wanted to revisit. One evening, as I sat on the couch sketching, I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the humiliation, the fight to reclaim what was mine. It had been a storm, no doubt about it, but storms clear the air, and in their aftermath, things grow. I'd grown. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I wasn't defined by Sophia's insults or her betrayal. I was defined by what I'd done in response, how I'd stood my ground, fought for myself, and come out stronger. As I set my sketchpad aside and looked out at the city lights through my newly hung curtains, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This was my life now. Simple, quiet, and entirely mine, and for the first time, that was more than enough.